There we go, Charles.
What do you know, Jason? Where are we?
Well, we're in Central Park, and I believe we're live right now.
Good.
I think we're going to cover some really important topics today, Charles. Obviously, we're talking about COVID-19, the geopolitical and economic impact of this outbreak. And I want to reiterate to people that at no point have I ever said that the outbreak and the virus are a hoax. I do believe there is a virus. I think there might be multiple strains of an extremely dangerous virus, and we're going to talk about that as we walk. But
sure.
I also want to talk about social engineering and how it plays into everything that's happening right now. We're right now at the 98th Street entrance of Central Park, where this Triage hospital has been built about a week ago. I came here initially with Mike Moore on Skype for the episode of More Pain. And, you know, Charles, there have been a lot of people who have sent me emails making wild allegations about this hospital. It's my personal opinion that this hospital has been set up by people with integrity who are here because they want to do the right thing. Now, is there someone out of all the people who are involved with this who maybe doesn't match that profile? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to condemn everyone involved in this based on what I believe to be a baseless rumor. People have been emailing me, Charles, that there are tunnels in Central Park, which we know there are.
Yeah.
You've seen them, I've seen them, we walk through them. We'll walk through some. Oh, we might lose signal if we walk through.
We're not going to do that.
But they do have tunnels. Now, there's no evidence that there's any children being hidden or trafficked through these tunnels.
Well, I mean, looking straight ahead here, you see a complex that is, I would say, you know, doesn't look very busy to me. We haven't seen, you and I have been here since before the broadcast started. We haven't seen a single ambulance pull into this place, anybody leave it. There's no hustle bustle. Now maybe there's feverish activity going on inside the tents. It's certainly possible, but...
Just checking our audio. Sounds okay.
Yeah, good.
Sorry, please continue.
So, and Samaritan's Purse, I believe, is affiliated with the Billy Graham larger set of charities. I don't know if that's his only one. I think he's got several of them. Mm-hmm. And as you say, these people probably thought it was a good idea based on the earliest scare reports that there were going to be 2.2 million deaths. You do the math quickly, you think about concentrations, you think about this being a sanctuary city. You think about it also being a global gateway with a lot of Chinese people having investments and Europeans in the city, toing and froing around Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. It would make sense to be petrified if you really thought there were going to be 2.2 million deaths exclusively due to COVID-19. That would be a terrifying prospect. It now certainly seems, in hindsight, that the models upon which the supposed experts were relying were grievously flawed.
Yeah.
And they have led virtually every government around the world to go from being a governments run by elected officials to governments dictated by unelected technocrats whose past track records have not necessarily been checked and scrutinized the way I hope they will be going forward.
Should we go over there and check it out a little more? Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Charles. I did a really, I think, excellent interview yesterday with a British, I think he's British, journalist named John Martin, who told me a lot of stuff that I didn't know about Dr. Tedros Adhanom, the Director General of the World Health Organization, and I encourage people who haven't seen that yet to check it out. The guys involved, you've always said that he's diabolical, and something that I've discovered, each of the guests that come on Crowdsource the Truth have unique aspects, as every person does. And what I've observed about you, Charles, is that you know so much about these topics that you sometimes will say something that you have a ton of backstory on, and because you know so much about it, there may be a presumption or an assumption or whatever that other people know as well. So you put out a statement that contains a ton of information, but sometimes people aren't necessarily privy to all that information, and the details are critical. One of the details I want to talk about, let's make a left here.
Okay.
One of the details I want to talk about, so this is a counterterrorism officer right here. which is interesting. We're seeing a lot of counterterrorism NYPD around. But one of the things that Tedros was involved in, Charles, had to do with a cholera outbreak in Ethiopia.
Right.
And you've told us that Tedros is a member of a Marxist political party. That's
senior member.
Senior member. He's the 6th. He's listed as number 6 on the list of all the guys in that government. It's the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
Right.
The Tigray are a ethnic minority
Right.
in Ethiopia. And as I understand the story, Dr. Tedros used his status. Now we should also say, he uses the title doctor because he has a PhD in public health administration or
like Chelsea.
community health or something like that, like Chelsea Clinton. So technically, yes, he can accurately use the title doctor. Excuse me, are you a doctor in the hospital? You're a nurse, and is it totally overrun inside Mount Sinai?
We're not allowed to talk about it.
But you're out here having lunch. If it were overrun, it doesn't seem like you'd have time to do that.
I mean, we still have to have a lunch break.
Right, but you look well rested, and your eyeliner looks
I've
nice.
had a couple days off.
Couple days off, so the hospital would not probably do that.
You.
Probably would not do that if it were overrun.
There's the Port Authority.
What are they going to do?
No, the trouble that we had.
Oh, I see. Right. Anyway, so just getting back to Dr. Tedros, Charles, as I understand it, Dr. Tedros used his status as the health minister of Ethiopia to issue an edict that there was no cholera outbreak in this region of Ethiopia that was populated by the ethnic majority that are direct opposition to the Tigray.
Right.
And what this did by saying, no, it's not cholera, it's like wet diarrhea syndrome or something like that, that denied those people UN funds and medicine and food, resulting in the death of children and innocent people. So what am I missing about that?
Well, I mean, the story with Tedros goes further back, and it fits the bill of what the way the Clintons operate. Tedros became health minister in 2005, early 2005. Yeah, we can maybe just stand here and talk for a little bit.
I'd say show your ID. I don't know if they'll let us in, but we'll try.
Right. So Tedros became health minister by January thereabouts of 2005.
Right.
In Ethiopia. At the same time, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which didn't lawfully exist and had not been gotten tax-exempt status, at the same time, they and Yale University, a professor named Elizabeth Bradley, who's now the president of Vassar College, began a program where Ira Magaziner and Bill Clinton and others were accessing global funds in solicitations that were illegal because the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative was not legitimate, and using the funds, in theory, to provide HIV and AIDS medicine into Ethiopia to upgrade the hospitals.
Sorry, Charles. Hey, is the hospital overrun? Is that facility totally full over there?
No, not really. They just have some patients in there.
And is Mount Sinai overrun? Do you work for Mount Sinai, or
I
you?
I do, but I don't have any logistics on that.
But it's not full.
I'm not sure.
Seems like it's not full, Charles. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. And so this is something that began by January 2005. Now, it had to be put together before that. Plans like this and press releases, and there are many of them, and there are many after-action academic reports by Bradley and by others who participated from 2005, many years going forward. Yale put out press releases and bragged about what they were doing, but all the while, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative was an illegitimate, unlawful, not organized properly, not operated properly, not accounted for properly, and to this day, the Clinton Foundation has not put the 990s, the tax returns for the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, on its website, nor has it put the application for federal tax exemption on its website, or a determination letter for that entity on its website, or any state forms on that website, or any audits at that point. And they used these activities, which they were giving themselves tons of publicity for, to then convince what ultimately really is the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation is none other than the World Health Organization through UNITAID. UNITAID is housed in the World Health Organization. So Tedros' involvement with the Clinton Foundation goes back to at least 2005. McKinsey was very much involved with Bill Gates trying to create the Global Fund and UNITAID and many other vaccine organizations.
Right.
Chelsea Clinton, you brought her up, did her master's thesis at Oxford, and there's another one I think at Columbia, one or two at Columbia, all about the creation of the Global Fund.
Now let me pause you there, because you've also told us in the past that Chelsea Clinton has done something to do with research involving diarrhea.
Yeah, so diarrhea when in settings where the children especially are malnourished is deadly. I mean, it's arguably, and I'm not a doctor, but it's arguably more dangerous
Than HIV.
far more dangerous than HIV, because if you're already malnutrition and you get this pervasive diarrhea, you basically lose the water in your body and you die. You die right away.
So the question that I have is, did Chelsea Clinton's research and any writing that she did on this topic help in any way for Tedros to issue this edict that, oh, that's not cholera over there?
We'll have to investigate that. I don't know the answer to that, but the one thing I can tell you is that Tedros started on this project with the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, and he's either stupid and didn't do any checking in Ethiopia to see whether the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative was legitimate, or whether the Clinton Foundation actually was organized and had the ability to do international work, or he knew all this and he viewed this, and his colleagues in an Ethiopian government that has to call it checkered is to be very polite. I mean, the Ethiopian government of which he was a part for many years stands accused of many abuses, and it probably should have been brought up before The Hague or the world, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those abuses include imprisoning and torturing journalists.
Right.
Okay. So we don't yet have that exactly in the United States. You've got to be first in London and the Ecuadorian embassy
Right.
in order to be imprisoned and tortured by the United States of America. But we've got this sort of hidden version of that where social engineers are attempting to really ruin the lives of people who are bringing forward these stories. We've heard about Cheryl Atkinson.
Right.
She's got forensic computer evidence that she was infiltrated by elements of the government.
When Eric Holder was Attorney
Eric
General,
Holder,
and then when
right. Lawsuits
Loretta
against
Lynch.
her, all kinds of things that would really disrupt her life. Let's go over here, Charles, and see if we can speak to them. But this is going to be something I want to talk about throughout the course of our show today, is how social engineering is a critical component of what is going on right now.
You can't go beyond this point.
Active essential personnel only. Hi.
Hi.
Is Melissa still here with you guys? I had spoken to Melissa a few days ago. Is there any press representative?
Press?
Is there a press?
There's no press thing going on.
Is there a press representative that I can speak to?
Oh, okay. I don't. Is there a press representative?
I'll grab it.
That guy says yes.
We're going to grab it.
Thanks.
I want you to stand over there.
Over there?
Press box.
No, the press box is, there's a pen basically on the other side of this trailer, on the
But I'll
side.
grab it.
Thanks very much.
Thank
we'll
you.
head over there.
Thanks.
Okay, there we go.
Speaking of careful, this is really crazy.
Yeah, we're going to get hit by a bus. Let's go to the sidewalk. Now, that guy with his gruff initial response who wanted to say no, I believe I spoke to the other day, and he wasn't friendly then either. Some people are watching the show, Charles, and they think I'm being rude. I'm actually quite polite to people who are polite to me.
Right.
But the second I get a tinge of rudeness, this is New York, and I don't stand for that.
And you are a New Yorker, unlike the Clintons,
Correct.
who just come here to abuse New Yorkers.
No, they're here to steal money.
I'm saying, abuse New Yorkers. So where is this press pool?
I guess it's this. We'll go in here and we'll see if Melissa or someone can join us, because, so, see, the thing that I'm opposed to, Charles, is people making accusations that are unsupported by evidence.
Oh, here's Melissa.
I don't think
somebody.
that's her, but that might be someone. Let's see what she says. Hi. Oh, it is Melissa. Remember me, Jason Goodman?
I don't, but it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. You look tired. Have you been really working hard?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, very well. You were so helpful and friendly the last time when I spoke to you. I just wanted to ask you a few more questions. Has the facility been overrun? We've heard on the news.
Filming?
I
On
am.
your life? Yeah, well, we're not taking interview requests right now, just to give our team the opportunity to really focus on the work that's going on.
Well, I just want to speak to you. I don't want to interview anybody who's working. I'm just curious, because employees of the hospital have told me that the hospital is not overrun, and last week you told me that this facility was intended to alleviate overrun from the hospital. So the question becomes, is this facility being utilized right now?
Yeah, right now I believe we have more than 40 patients that are receiving critical care from our doctors and nurses. If you need more of an update, I couldn't get you that, but right now they are still continuing to work around the clock and treat those impacted by the coronavirus.
But there is still capacity in the hospital, right?
I'm not sure. I haven't talked to someone from the hospital.
Or what about
yet.
in this facility? What's the capacity of the facility?
Yeah, so we have 68 beds in here. And right now, like I said, we are treating more than 40 victims of the coronavirus. So I can talk to our medical team if you want more of an update on specifics, but that's kind of an overview of what today looks like.
Is the 40 who are being treated, are they exclusively suffering from COVID, or do they have comorbidity?
So this hospital treats specifically those that are stricken with the coronavirus, so that those are the patients.
And that's it? And, not somebody who also has cancer or somebody who also has
yeah, so
only COVID?
So we're treating those that are stricken with the coronavirus here at our emergency field hospital.
Okay.
And how do they determine that a patient comes in here if the hospital is not over capacity?
I can talk to our medical teams if you want more information on how that works.
Sure, yeah, we'll do that, and maybe I'll come back and speak to you later. There's another thing I wanted to bring to your attention, Melissa, because the impression I get from you is that you seem like a very honest person who's here spending her time and really sacrificing your time for the right reasons. That's my personal impression. And there are people who watch the show who've been spreading unfounded rumors. They have no evidence of this, and I want these people to understand that they can't just jump to these conclusions. I don't know if you're aware of these rumors. Have you heard any of them?
Well, we're here in New York City to provide hope and critical care to those that are stricken with COVID-19. We're here to join New York City in the battle against the deadly virus. So we're, like I said, working around the clock to provide that critical care to those that are impacted by the virus, ultimately praying that the virus subsides.
Right. Where is Samaritan's Purse based?
We're based in Boone, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Melissa.
Bye.
So just so people know, that kid who's crying is just having a bad day with his mom. There's no evidence, Charles, that anything untoward is going on in that hospital. My
Right.
suspicion right now is that they built this for exactly the reasons that Melissa just told us, in anticipation of a
Right.
huge overrun, and that overrun hasn't yet occurred. I'm curious to know the criteria by which they determine why a patient goes there rather than being in the hospital. She said that that's not full. An employee we just spoke to said the hospital is not full. On my walk over here to meet you, here, it's 2 more employees. Do you guys work in the hospital? Do you guys work in Mount Sinai? Is it overrun with patients?
Can't talk about that.
So that sounds like no. Sorry? I don't know, that guy didn't want to be filmed, so.
Yeah, that's his right, I suppose.
Actually, no, if he's out on the street, he can say he doesn't want to be, but I have a right to film him just as much as he has a right to not be filmed. We'll leave him alone. I mean, again, I don't think people would be casually strolling back into the hospital if it was such a crush. You'd run out, you'd get your coffee, probably you'd send somebody else to get the coffee.
Right, but let's just go back into that train you were asking. So in the case of Tedros and Rajat Gupta, who was at the time managing director of McKinsey, subsequently was prisoner number XYZ for having been convicted of trading on inside information or passing inside information when he was in a position of fiduciary trust. Back in April 4th, 2001, when in the earliest days of the George W. Bush presidency, there was a huge hue and cry to tackle HIV and AIDS. Consensus statement of AIDS was signed not by Harvard itself, but by a whole bunch of people somehow, one way or another, affiliated with Harvard. And that led to the push to set up a global fund to fight HIV, AIDS, and malaria, tuberculosis.
Right.
Internationally, that is sourced upwards of $40 billion for that cause. We are aware, people we work with, well, I can mention Larry Doyle, who is on Twitter now, very actively putting out information that's extremely useful. Larry W. Doyle USA is his handle, and he puts the specifics up now on his Twitter feed. But one of the things that he and his team found out is an estimate that 75% of all the money sent through the Global Fund was diverted, which is the polite way of saying stolen.
Right.
Okay, that's a $40 billion case, maybe $60 billion. Now, the same people, literally the very same people who were agitating for the Global Fund and who refused to let it be, that's, by the way, housed in the World Health Organization, refused to have any kind of transparency on that, are now rushing to say we need $2.5 trillion or $2.2 trillion to fight COVID. And the real lesson of all this is that if you want to set up systems to attack these type of dread diseases, you start in the places where there is health infrastructure. In the United States, you say what you want, there is health infrastructure.
We just saw another guy in blue hospital scrubs, walking, not running.
Right, careful.
Ooh, yeah, gotta watch for dog do.
Yeah, so these very same people are agitating for taxpayers in the wealthy countries to start chipping in hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars to fight, an unseen, ill understood threat. Now, you can't do that if you're trying to fight a global disease.
Should we go into the park and walk in the park?
We can do it as you wish. The Met is up there, though, which I was thinking we'd.
Sure.
But whatever you want.
Well, no, let's follow where you want to go. I just want to make sure that we visit the Alice in Wonderland sculpture, because that's going to play into what we're explaining to people today.
Yeah, that's another 20 blocks away.
Yeah.
So
I hope you don't get too hot with this jacket.
fine.
It's amazingly warm
Watch
today,
it.
considering it was snowing in Brooklyn yesterday.
Yeah. So if you're going to fight these global diseases, we can cross all over there. It's a beggar there. If you're going to fight these global diseases, you have to make sure.
This guy's having a rough day, Charles.
Right. You have to make sure that the health system in every country where the disease might spread is up to the task of combating the disease. And that's not the case. I mean, for all these years of spending a large sums of money. Let's move it along.
Yep. A little careful, Charles.
I got it.
Okay, we got the light now.
Take a country with a large population like Nigeria or one like Pakistan, or India for that matter even, there isn't the health infrastructure necessary to deliver doctors and nurses and hospital beds and the like to treat hundreds of millions, billions of people who may have been infected by this disease. And you can talk all you want about paying for drugs and vaccines and stuff like that. If you don't have the doctors on the ground, you don't have the nurses on the ground, you don't have electricity, you don't have the structures, you don't have roads, and the populations are dispersed, it's a prescription for fraud.
I've heard a lot of medical doctors on the internet, Charles, now talking about how this societal reliance on vaccines is perhaps a medically unsound road to go down,
right,
because it's reducing collectively the strength of the human immune system by having everybody rely on these vaccines rather than what many doctors have argued is a sound medical practice of building herd immunity,
right,
by allowing healthy people to contract the disease and develop an immunity to it. Because what a lot of people are saying is that if a second wave comes next year and the vaccine doesn't work, how did we move away from you get chicken pox when you're 5 and then you're good for the rest of your life, or you get a mumps shot when you're a baby and you move away from being sick of that for the rest of your life, to now needing a flu shot every year. That doesn't work by most accounts.
Right. So
should we go up there?
As you wish. So, or it might be prettier along.
Yeah. Let's show people where we're walking here.
I mean, this is prime New York City real estate, or it was. And apartments in these buildings are spacious. They can go for, depending on the building, 40 million, 50 million each,
Wow.
100 million, some cases.
So you'll only buy 2, right?
I don't want to be a hostage to New York City.
Oh, well, welcome to 2020, Joe.
Right. So anyway, this is really a beautiful part of New York, and apartments that look out on the park here are extremely valuable. It's surprising to see so many people in the park. It's a beautiful day, but I thought.
Well, this is so few compared to what you would see if we weren't under a pandemic, but so many, you mean, in comparison to?
None.
Right.
And that, that building there is a single-family home.
Which one?
That one on the corner, yeah.
The red brick one?
Yeah.
Wow, who lives there?
Don't know.
Wow.
Somebody with either a lot of cash or a lot of debt or both.
I mean, a property like that must have been in a family for many, many generations. I mean, that's got to be worth how many millions, do you think?
It would easily, it depends. At the peak of the market, something like that big, probably 60 million, 100 million.
Wow. And the address appears to be 1130-1130.
Yeah, very beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. So, you were saying?
Yeah, so Tedros' involvement here follows the plan, the Clinton plan, or the plan in which the Clintons would participate, of plucking a relatively junior person out of obscurity and putting them into a very high position where they can be manipulated. Mm-hmm. And Tedros did this program. That program was likely used as justification for the World Health Organization to decide, when it created UNITAID September 19th, 2006, housed in the World Health Organization, to funnel 50% of the monies that went into UNITAID from governments and the Gates Foundation to Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., which didn't exist.
Right.
Okay? So there's people doing due diligence on Tedros, stress testing him. It's a long line of monumental, excuse me for this language on an Easter, fuck-ups. It's a long, he's a reliable fuck-up.
I think that's being generous. I think that what he's doing is deliberate. I think he has a history of manipulating medical data and using his political position to issue public health orders that are specifically intended to service his own political and financial gain. And he's the guy of all the information that is leading our politicians to the public policies that they're making surrounding this COVID-19. Now, let's explore it, Charles, if we can, from the standpoint of, because there's a number of credible experts, including PhD Dr. Judy Mikovits,
right,
who claim that there is forensic evidence to indicate that this is a manufactured virus, that it's a bioweapon.
It could well be. It could well be. And even before, if you don't mind, I just want to pull us back a little bit.
Sure.
As we were talking about HIV and AIDS, the whole process in which Fauci and Birx were involved of deciding how to treat HIV and maybe AIDS is, when you go back over its long history, deeply flawed.
Absolutely.
Deeply flawed. On the one hand, the so-called, I believe he is the inventor of email, is running for Senate in Massachusetts. He points out that the link between HIV and AIDS has not been conclusively established in science.
Is that Dr. Shiva?
Shiva, exactly. I don't know what you think of him.
I haven't spoken to him, but I think he's putting out some very interesting information. I'd like to speak to him. Is that the Frick, Charles?
No, Frick is further down.
What is that? Cooper Hewitt, it says.
I can't see it. Which one you're talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of behind the trees now. Yeah. But there are a lot of really impressive things right here. So Shiva has said, and he's an MIT scientist, he's a PhD, he's an MD as well, isn't he?
Yeah, and so he and others, when you get into the history of it, the early history, you had people dying of it, of what they thought was AIDS,
right?
HIV going to AIDS in the United States and in the West, who could have their lives extended by antiretroviral drugs, which were branded, but cost about $10,000 a year back in the 90s.
Right.
And the simple math of it back then was, at that high cost, nobody in the developing world could be treated. There was just no way to do it.
Maybe very few people in the United States could afford a treatment like that.
Right. But I mean, it was a death sentence for anybody who, in theory, caught it in Africa or in other poor parts of the world.
Now let me ask you this, Charles. If you knew there was a sickness out there and a doctor told you had it and you're going to die, wouldn't you or any person spend all of their money and resources trying to protect themselves from that sickness? It's hard to imagine a better motivator than the fear of death.
Right.
So it seems like a good way to make money if you're the guy with the vaccine.
Well, again, so back in this early period, what Fauci and Birx did is they tested a whole bunch of different drugs, and the early prescriptions were for formulations that are now banned for use in treating HIV and AIDS because they're so toxic, so dangerous. These HIV/AIDS drugs, I understand. I'm no medical expert. I'm very squeamish. I'm trying to talk about this without losing my lunch, but there's a great lady named Celia Farber, daughter of the great Barry Farber, the father of conservative talk radio before Rush.
Oh yeah.
And she wrote an article in Harper's about this, which is really, that's the Guggenheim.
Yep.
We're now in Men in Black territory.
Yeah.
But
she wrote that article, yeah.
And it's grisly. It talks about a woman who was pregnant, went in for a normal test, and they diagnosed her as being HIV positive. They immediately put her on this medication. She died like 45 days later.
Oh.
It's a gruesome article.
Whoa.
And in that article, it recounts that some of these drugs, when prescribed the wrong way, would cause, the way you would die if you were African, is your skin would melt off your body.
What?
Gruesome stuff. And so, you know, early days, pioneering days, doctors can be forgiven for being terrified of something that seems like it could sweep the world and kill 1 billion people or 100 million people.
Right.
But on the other hand, let's learn from our mistakes. HIV and AIDS, it would seem the prevalence in the rich countries is down today, but the prevalence in countries like Lesotho and Zambia and Mozambique and other countries still remains high. Why is that?
Well, do we know that that's the fact, or
Well,
that's just what the WHO is telling us?
That's what they allege.
Right.
So better, you know, rather than giving some communist bureaucrat authority to tank the global economy, as he has done with his allies, Birx and Fauci, isn't a wiser approach to say, WHO, WTF, get out of here. You know, we'll control the health system in our country.
Right.
You know, and we'll bar other people from coming into this country for a time until we have this sorted out. Mm-hmm. And then we'll decide what other countries have health systems that are up to snuff. We'll do that ourselves.
I ask you this, Charles, even without all these questionable, reprehensible political actions and really tyrannical things that Dr. Tedros Adhanom has been involved in, why would the World Health Organization choose the Minister of Health for a country like Ethiopia, which is certainly not renowned for its extensive public health program, hospitals, doctors, etc.? It seems counterintuitive. Why wouldn't they take someone from the United States, Germany, France, England, Canada, one of these countries with a more developed public health system?
Well, so as Donald Trump has pointed out, the Chinese are disproportionately influential in the World Health Organization and other international organizations, even though they contribute paltry sums compared to what we contribute.
And Bill Gates contributes.
Right. And Ethiopia is also famed, it's been called for decades, perhaps longer than that, as a country that could feed all of Africa. It has, you know, arable land, fertile soil, and it is prized for that reason.
But famous in the 80s for the famine.
Right. Well, that's what happens when you have socialist or Marxist dictatorship, letting people like Fauci and Birx decide what industries should open up and what shouldn't open up.
Right.
And so what if the stock market tanks for trillions of dollars? You know, we've made sure that this virus, the flu associated with it, comes in at roughly the same level as normal flu. You want to keep going, I think.
Yeah. Well, not only that, they've got their money. None of them look like their businesses are collapsing or they're going hungry or they're worried about how they're going to pay their employees.
And then, you know, when you do some elementary investigation, you discover that Fauci wrote what people characterize as love letters to Hillary Clinton in 2016. He's been regularly involved with my favorite spooky evil dude, George Soros.
Your favorite Martian?
Exactly. My favorite fraudster.
That actually, the guy who was my favorite Martian was Mr. Hand.
Was he really?
Who was featured in the thumbnail graphic of my conversation with Dr. Cameron Kyle Seidel. Now, Charles, there's one other thing that I want to point out to you with regard to Birx and Fauci. So, TruePundit.com earlier this past week had a story in there. Mike Moore, who is the editor of TruePundit.com and the guy behind the Thomas Paine podcast that people can hear on iTunes and elsewhere, he's received a document from the Department of the Air Force that includes court proceedings that the Army and other government groups, people can get all the details from TruePundit.com, but they basically put Redfield, the guy who's the head of the CDC, on trial for scientific fraud.
Just the person you want.
Well, for falsifying evidence and results in their study. The Army had paid $20 million to develop an HIV vaccine, and this guy was falsifying the results, charged with scientific fraud. His assistant was Birx.
Right, and Birx's husband was Bill Clinton's advance person, trying to put together visits with foreign nations. I mean, somebody in the Trump administration is not doing the vetting that needs to be done of these people. I think that you know, we went from a country that was run by an elected government, to a country that is run now by faceless bureaucrats. And you know, I understand that Trump gave an order, or Pence gave an order, that nobody on the coronavirus team was supposed to go on CNN. Fauci was on CNN this morning, dissing Trump.
Whoa, Fauci.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it.
That guy.
So for people who don't know New York, this is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it is a phenomenal building, closed to the public, of course, thought to be very, very expensive real estate. Any apartment right around here. Sorry.
No, that's right. Keep telling us.
And I used to live on 82nd Street.
Yeah, keep going.
On 82nd Street, further east between Lex and Park. And what I used to do, this was back in '96, and before then, my kids and wife and nanny would live in our country house for the summer, and then they come back here in early September the kids to go to school. And in '96, in September of '96, I was actually at the office during the day on a Sunday, and they came out here, just here, to this place, which is normally thronged with visitors or whatever. And as they were walking down 82nd Street there, a Hispanic guy came up to my son and said, "You fucking rich kid with your fucking nannies," because we had two. I've got a knife, and I'm going to knife you."
Wow.
And my son then was 8. Yeah, well, David Koch.
Well, that's what I just noticed. I don't mean to interrupt the story, but what's up with that?
No, he's just a big donor to the.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
I see.
This generally
what's
is.
up with this? It looks like a sundial or something.
No, it's generally, there's water. It's a fountain. So down on this, just to finish on the story. So my son turns to the attacker and he goes, "You shouldn't use those words. Those are bad words." And the two nannies take my son, like throw him down the street. And I come home and they said, "You're not going to believe what happened." And they tell me the story, and I said to my wife, "Did you call the police?" And she said, "Why would I do that?"
Wow. Well, she's got a point. They generally don't do it.
No, we called the police. 90 seconds later, they were at the apartment.
Oh, wow.
It's a hate crime.
So what happened?
They never caught him. But I mean, the point is that to give you a sense of how this city works, this is where I lived wasn't super expensive, but right here is super expensive choice real estate.
Right.
Some people don't like it because it's so busy during the weekend with tourists that it's very noisy in these apartment buildings. But in the main, most people are pretty happy if they find out they own an apartment in one of these buildings.
Right.
And the Frick, to answer your question, is further down here.
Right, right. Well, another place that we're going to stop on our walk here, and this is definitely interesting for people to see. I think a lot of people have been enjoying just, going around New York City, seeing parts of the city maybe they've never seen before, haven't been to. What is that, Charles?
It's some kind of, looks like Yoda, but actually it looks like a Chinese statue.
Why do we need a Chinese statue?
They have all kinds of, there's another one over there to your right.
Yep, I see it. A lot of interesting symbology. Anyway, we're gonna go to the Alice in Wonderland sculpture in Central Park, because people have been writing to me, Charles, saying that there's these tunnels in Central Park, that this whole COVID-19 thing, according to these people, is a cover for a rescue operation to rescue children out of the tunnels. Now, not only have I seen no evidence of that, it seems somewhat ridiculous on its face. I do not believe, if such an operation were going on, that there would be a need to introduce this false story as alleged in these baseless claims. Now, finally, after 2 or 3 weeks of people making these allegations, someone presented me yesterday I don't know if that's going to solve it. That's really disappointing. See, what did I tell you, Charles, about my number one thing? Let's see if we can fix it. Oh, that's so disappointing.
Maybe it'll come back. It says active.
No, the problem now is it's gonna not work properly.
Bear with us, folks.
This happened once before.
We're on 77th and 5th. We're 5 blocks away from the Alice in Wonderland setup.
Let's see if it does. I don't know. Okay. Let's see. Maybe the audio has been fixed. Let's see what people say. Okay. Okay, so people are trying to get my attention. Audio okay, good now. Held for review, good now. Okay, 2 or 3 minutes lost.
That's all right. We'll
Okay, all right. Okay, it's fixed, everyone is saying, so that's good. So here's what I'm going to do, Charles, for the audio that's lost, because it's a very confusing and difficult process to fix it on YouTube, and then there's two different versions. We're going to leave this version as it is,
right,
and I'll remaster it with the original audio that's being recorded on a separate device, and that version will appear on Patreon and Subscribestar for the sponsors who make all the shows on Crowdsource the Truth possible. I hope that people got the gist of what we were talking about there, but let's go back over it, because we're going to go in here now and check out the Alice in Wonderland.
That's further down.
Is it? I thought it was 76th or something.
No, I think it's 72nd. I used to play here as a kid, so that's just a normal little playground. The Alice in Wonderland one is connected to the boat.
People are saying they didn't get any of the Alice in Wonderland stuff. Well,
why don't you go back and do that?
Okay, so we can look at that real quickly again. What I was saying is that today's graphic has been put together so that people can really sort of understand the story that we're talking about. We got Chelsea Clinton there, and I suspect that her writing about diarrhea, I don't know, people can look into this, but I think it had something to do with Tedros and the cholera outbreak. We've got Dr. Fauci there as the rabbit eating up the clock. Tedros is pictured with his red face. The blood on his hands is depicted by the red rose he's embedded in over there, and people are going to notice there's a lot of symbology in this poster, even in the Disney version here, that looks like some of the symbology that is associated with pedophilia. And of course we got Phallus himself right there, Bill Clinton.
That's Bill Bent Clinton.
Right, and his little pink worm of a press flack smoking the crack pipe or whatever he's doing up there. That's Angel Urena, who has cyber-stalked you online, Charles.
That's, yeah. Nice.
I noticed when looking around for images of the Mad Hatter's hat, they all had this 10/6, and I don't know what that means, if it's a hat size or a joke about a hat size, but when you do that math, 10 divided by 6 is 1.66666.
That's the Alice in Wonderland there.
And it occurred to me that this whole COVID outbreak is a boon for criminals like Michael Avenatti, who's been let out of jail, I saw a report yesterday, and we've also got Epstein pictured there with his good friend Bill Gates. We're finding out there's a lot more connections between Epstein and Bill Gates than might have initially been understood. Ghislaine Maxwell, and of course the Queen of Mean, Hillary, and the smiling dope Barack Obama up in the sky there. And I thought that people would enjoy that bit of artwork. So there we are. We can see the Alice of Wonderland sculpture
it's
right
really quite
there.
beautiful.
Right. And I wanted to come here because, you know, the statement that there are tunnels in Central Park is true. And
the statement that they're filled with children is likely not true.
Well, it's dubious. We haven't seen any evidence of it. So I'm very concerned about these social engineering operations that take a piece of valid evidence, like there's tunnels in Central Park, or there's a mass grave being dug on Hart Island, and then what they do is they weave that into a false narrative that's intended to misdirect people. And they do it in an incredibly manipulative and sinister way, Charles, because they're playing on people's emotions, they're playing on people's fears, and if a story, it appeals to someone's bias, if it seems plausible, there are a lot of people who are prone to believe it, even in the absence of evidence.
Well, look at this, Jason. Twinkle, twinkle, little bat.
Whoa. What does it say? Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. What does that mean?
That's from Alice in Wonderland. This as a child, a young child, I used to come here and play. This is quite a sculpture, quite an intricate sculpture, I think in bronze, Jason? Is that what it looks like to you?
I guess, yeah. When was this created? Do you know, Charles?
It probably says somewhere, but behind us over here, this is where, as a kid, I used to take your little
remote control boat?
Well, not a model sailboat back in the day.
Don't they have remote? I see kids with remote controls.
Yeah.
You didn't have that?
Not back in 1869, no.
Oh, 1869, right. Well, so this is quite a sculpture that perhaps some people haven't seen, but I felt that the imagery in the poster for the movie and the changes that I made by integrating some of the scoundrels that are behind what seems to be a social engineering campaign to drive fear throughout the world. It's,
Right.
I have to say, Charles, if, as some experts
keep going,
have, if, wait, here's another one here. It says, wait a minute. Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
What are these bizarre sayings? I haven't noticed these before.
Oh, this is
'Twas brillig.
yeah, that's from that, is it Osmandius? That's another
And
poem.
the slithy toad.
Yeah, that's not, I don't, maybe that's buried within Alice in Wonderland, but it's a separate,
What does any of this mean?
it doesn't mean anything. It's,
Well, it must mean something. Someone wrote
I mean, it's not in English.
Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle, for Tweedledum said Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle.
Yeah.
Charles, this is some cryptic, weird stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see what this says. Beautiful soup. That other one was talking about bats. Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen. Who for such dainties would not stoop? Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Is it talking about bat soup?
No.
What is soup of the evening?
I don't know. It's not that.
Channel are we going to see you in?
Sorry?
Which channel are we going to see you in?
Crowdsource the Truth on YouTube.
Really? Okay.
You have an accent, ma'am. Where are you from?
I'm from Germany.
And are you visiting or you live in New York?
I live here.
Yeah, I can tell. You've lived here for some time, huh? What do you think about the whole thing that's going on right now?
Well, I hope it's going to be over very, very soon. But that's just hope, I guess, right?
You're not
Nobody
wearing
knows.
a mask? You're not afraid of
She's
contracting-
got a treatment.
No.
Oh, that's right. Coronavirus is afraid of wine. Well, it's good to see you enjoying this spring day. I'm Jason Goodman.
Okay.
So search on YouTube for Jason Goodman or Crowdsource the Truth.
Okay.
And this is Charles Ortel.
Okay, we will.
All right.
So just the last bit of poetry here, Charles. It says,
They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. Anyway, let's keep.
yeah. Someone in the comments is saying I forgot the rabbit and it should have been Anthony Weiner. The rabbit was Dr. Fauci, and he's looking at the time because he's got to run out the clock.
Ooh.
Whoa, that's not stairs.
That's not going to work.
Wow, that's dangerous. I'm a little surprised they have that like that.
So, but on the subject of Alice in Wonderland,
Yes.
and on the subject of monetizing misery, that seems to be, I'm sure there are many well-meaning liberals, but what we've seen under the H.W. Bush, I don't know if you're going that way or this way, or
Sorry, yeah.
which way?
Keep going.
I mean,
Oh, yeah. Oh, this
we
way,
have
right.
a fork in the road.
I was going to swim.
Well, I thought you could just walk on water. But it is Easter.
Exactly.
And happy Easter and happy,
Happy Easter
I don't know if you
and
say
happy
happy
Passover.
Happy Passover.
Yeah.
But on a typical Sunday in the spring, this place would be mobbed with boats and everything. But the business model that H.W. Bush, Clinton, W. Bush, Obama, and many of the globalists seem to be following is to raise money off the misery of others.
Yes.
Raise large amounts of money.
Maybe even cause the misery to then raise money against.
Right, and put in place oppressive bureaucracies that make it very difficult for people to flourish in the private sector and make you reliant on these big governments in the US and around the world.
Right.
That seems to be the business model. It's the opposite. I mean, you would think that if you're a true do-gooder, what you want to do is you want to protect the young and the old. The young because they're not educated yet, and the old because they're vulnerable health-wise. But that's not what these governments do. They're doing the opposite.
Right.
I mean, we have tanked under Fauci and Birx, ceding experts the authority to basically run the global economy. We have tanked the global economy
Yep.
at a time when very few people have savings
Yep.
and where governments are heavily indebted. So we're piling debt onto an economy. Who knows?
Piling debt on, Charles.
Right, and piling horseshit on as well. Some Easter horseshit for our viewers. And this is not a sensible approach. It would have been far more sensible. You hear reports that doctors are saying, if you're under 70 and you're otherwise healthy, you stand a very good chance, just like normal flu, of getting through this.
Yes.
If you're over 70 and you got hypertension, diabetes, cancer, your immune system is challenged, and you're obese or overweight, you got some issues, and you should make sure that you protect yourself.
Right.
But to shut everybody down the way we've done it, I'm not sure this was the smartest decision.
Economically or medically.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who agree with you. So, I mean, again, we're not telling anybody to defy orders. We're just asking questions that many people have on their minds. Is this the best decision for the country? And it's really interesting to see. I keep coming back to the social engineering aspect of this, Charles, because as with every social engineering campaign, there has to be an element of truth to it or it will not work. So.
Right.
I've seen increasing, and I should say increasingly convincing elements of evidence that support the theory that this was a biological attack. And whether it's from China or a combination of Chinese individuals, globalists like Bill Gates, people who he was associated with like Jeffrey Epstein, etc., whatever it is, if it's a biological attack,